What if the most legendary creator in all of Middle-earth once sat down with the most mysterious being who ever existed? Picture this: Fëanor, the brilliant Noldorin prince, whose hands crafted the Silmarils, face to face with Tom Bombadil, the enigmatic forest dweller who predates even the elves themselves. This isn't some random fan theory. This is a deep dive into one of Tolkien's most intriguing possibilities, pieced together from scattered hints, ancient timelines, and the professor's own metaphysical framework. Here's what nobody talks about. Tom Bombadil doesn't just ignore the One Ring when Frodo offers it to him. He treats it like a trinket, slips it on, laughs, and remains completely visible. That's not ignorance, and that's comprehensive understanding. You don't casually dismiss the most powerful artifact in Middle-earth unless you've seen its like before, or better yet, witnessed its very conception. And if anyone alive during the forging of the Rings of Power might have encountered Tom Bombadil in ages past, it would be Fëanor himself. Let's establish the timeline here. Fëanor lived during the years of the trees in Valinor, long before the First Age even began. Tom Bombadil, according to Gandalf, is older than the world's current memory. He existed before the Elves awakened, before Sauron served Morgoth. That puts Tom's existence somewhere in the primordial ages of Arda itself. So when Fëanor was at his peak, crafting the Silmarils in his workshop in Tirion, Tom was already ancient beyond measure. Now here's where it gets fascinating. The Silmarils weren't just pretty gems. They were repositories of the light of the two trees of Valinor, created through a combination of incredible skill and what Tolkien describes as subcreation, the ability to channel divine creative power. But here's what most people miss. Fëanor didn't work in isolation. The craft of making things of power, binding light and essence into physical form, had precedents, ancient precedents. What if Tom Bombadil, in his wanderings through the early ages of Arda, had mastered forms of creation that even the Valar barely understood? Think about it. Tom commands Old Man Willow with a song. He banishes the Barrow-wights with words that reshape reality itself. His very presence seems to alter the flow of time and space around his domain. That's not just nature magic, that's fundamental manipulation of Arda's structural laws. So imagine this scenario. Fëanor, driven by his insatiable hunger for knowledge and creation, somehow learns of this mysterious being who exists beyond the borders of Valinor's influence. Maybe through dreams, maybe through ancient texts in his grandfather Finwë's libraries, or perhaps through whispers from the Valar themselves, who remain deliberately vague about the deeper mysteries of Arda's foundation. The meeting wouldn't happen in Valinor. The Valar would never permit such an encounter within their realm. Instead, it would take place in some liminal space, perhaps in the distant reaches of Middle-earth during one of Fëanor's secret expeditions, or in a realm between worlds where time moves differently and ancient powers still echo. Picture Fëanor approaching through twilight forests that seem to bend around an unseen presence. He's not coming as a supplicant. He's coming as the greatest craftsman of his age, seeking knowledge from someone who might have witnessed the very foundations of creation itself. And there, sitting by a stream that flows uphill, singing nonsense rhymes that somehow make perfect sense, is Tom Bombadil. The conversation wouldn't be what either of them expects. Fëanor arrives with questions about binding light, about capturing divine essence in physical form, about pushing the boundaries of what subcreation can achieve. Tom responds with riddles wrapped in melodies, observations about butterflies and bread, stories that sound like children's tales but contain wisdom older than the mountains. But slowly, something profound emerges. Tom begins to speak about the music of creation itself, the Ainulindala that sang the world into being. He hints at harmonies beyond what the Valar taught, at rhythms that pulse through the foundations of reality itself. And Fëanor, for the first time since his youth, finds himself learning rather than teaching. This is where the real magic happens. Tom doesn't give Fëanor technical instructions. He doesn't hand him formulas or incantations. Instead, he shows him how to listen to the world itself, how to hear the ongoing song of creation that never stopped, only shifted into frequencies most beings can no longer perceive. And in that teaching, Fëanor discovers something that will revolutionize his craft. The Silmarils, when Fëanor finally creates them, aren't just containers for the light of the trees. They're resonance chambers designed to capture and amplify the underlying music of creation itself. The light they hold is merely the visible manifestation of something far deeper. That's why they burn the hands of evil. That's why they inspire such desperate longing. They contain not just illumination, but harmony itself. But here's the tragic irony. Tom Bombadil also warns Fëanor about the dangers of his ambition. In his cryptic way, he speaks of songs that become possessive, of light that casts deeper shadows, of creations that create their creators. He tells stories about makers who became unmade by their making, about beauty that births destruction, about stars that fall because they burn too bright. Fëanor listens, but he doesn't truly hear. The pride that will eventually lead to his downfall is already taking root. He takes Tom's teachings about the deep music and transforms them into something personal, something owned. Where Tom speaks of participation in creation, Fëanor hears mastery over creation. Where Tom demonstrates harmony with natural law, Fëanor sees techniques to transcend natural law. The meeting ends not with celebration, but with a kind of cosmic sadness. Tom sees what Fëanor will become, the oath he'll swear, the kinslaying he'll commit, the wars that will follow. But he also sees the terrible necessity of it. The Silmarils, for all their cost, will play essential roles in the great music. Eärendil will bear one across the sky. Elwing will carry another to the undying lands. Even their theft will serve purposes beyond Fëanor's comprehension. So, Tom lets Fëanor leave with knowledge that is both gift and curse. He offers no final warnings, no last attempts at dissuasion. He simply returns to his singing, perhaps humming a tune that will later inspire the rhythm Fëanor uses when crafting his masterworks. And Fëanor departs, carrying within him both the seeds of Middle-earth's greatest beauty and its most devastating sorrow. This explains so much about Tom's later behavior with the ring. He's seen this pattern before. He's watched a great maker pour his soul into objects of power, witnessed how possession becomes obsession, observed how the creator becomes enslaved by the created. When he handles Sauron's ring with such casual indifference, he's not just demonstrating his immunity, he's showing what true mastery looks like, not ownership, but freedom from the need to own. The parallels between Fëanor and Sauron become even more chilling in this context. Both were master craftsmen who sought to bind others through their creations. Both confused power over things with power itself. Both became prisoners of their own ambitions. Tom's ancient encounter with Fëanor taught him exactly what to expect from anyone who tried to dominate through craftsmanship. But there's another layer here that most people miss. Tom's relationship with time isn't linear. He exists in what Tolkien calls the eternal present, aware of past and future as simultaneous realities. When he met Fëanor, he wasn't just encountering the proud prince of the Noldor, he was also seeing the oath-bound kinslayer, the desperate exile, the broken craftsman who would die clutching a Silmaril he could never truly possess. This temporal complexity adds devastating weight to their interaction. Every teaching Tom offers, every warning he gives, every moment of beauty they share, is shadowed by foreknowledge of its ultimate corruption. Yet Tom shares anyway, because that too is part of the music. Creation includes its own undoing. Beauty encompasses its own tragedy. The song contains both harmony and discord, and both are necessary. Consider what this means for our understanding of the Silmarils themselves. If they were influenced by Tom's teachings about the deep music, then they're not just elvish artifacts, they're collaborations between the oldest wisdom in Arda and the newest ambition. They represent the intersection of primal harmony and individual will, of eternal truth and temporal desire. This would explain their terrible beauty, their capacity to inspire both worship and war. They contain genuine divine light, but filtered through prideful craftsmanship. They offer real connection to the music of creation, but mediated through possessive ownership. They are simultaneously the most sacred and most dangerous objects in Middle-earth, because they embody the fundamental tension between being and having. Tom's influence might also explain why the Silmarils ultimately escape mortal possession. One rises to become a star beyond anyone's reach. Another sinks into the earth, returning to the deep places where Tom's kind of wisdom dwells. The third disappears into the sea, joining the vast unconscious rhythms that Tom represents. In the end, they return to the realm of the gift rather than the possession, of participation rather than ownership. The meeting between Tom and Fëanor represents something profound about the nature of knowledge itself. Tom embodies wisdom without ambition, understanding without the need to control. Fëanor represents skill with desperate hunger, brilliance coupled with the compulsion to dominate. When these two forces intersect, the result is both magnificent and catastrophic. This dynamic echoes throughout Middle-earth's history. Every great making, from the Rings of Power to the Palantiri, follows the same pattern. Knowledge shared freely becomes wisdom. Knowledge grasped possessively becomes curse. The difference isn't in the information itself, but in the spirit with which it's received and applied. Tom's teaching method reveals this principle in action. He doesn't lecture or demonstrate. He sings, tells stories, asks questions, creates space for discovery rather than demanding acknowledgement. His wisdom is like water, taking the shape of whatever vessel contains it. But Fëanor's vessel is cracked by pride, so the wisdom that should have flowed freely instead becomes trapped and transformed. The tragedy is that Fëanor almost grasps this truth. In moments during their conversation, he glimpses what Tom is really showing him. He sees the possibility of creation without possession, of making without ownership. But the habits of a lifetime, the cultural expectations of his people, the very structure of his identity as the greatest of the Noldor pulls him back toward the familiar patterns of mastery and control. Tom recognizes this struggle and responds with infinite patience. He doesn't condemn Fëanor's choices or try to force different decisions. He simply continues to model an alternative way of being, hoping that somewhere in the depths of the Elf Lord's spirit, the example will take root and eventually flower into something better. But Tom also knows that transformation can't be imposed from outside. It has to emerge from within, through the slow, often painful process of discovering that what we thought we wanted isn't what we actually need. Fëanor's journey toward this realization will take millennia and cost countless lives, but it's still a journey worth supporting. This is why Tom's apparent indifference to the great events of Middle-earth isn't really indifference at all. It's recognition that the most important changes happen in hearts and minds, not on battlefields. Wars can shift borders and topple kingdoms, but they can't alter the fundamental relationship between beings and their world. Only wisdom can do that, and wisdom works on its own timeline. The meeting with Fëanor plants seeds that won't germinate for ages. But eventually, in distant times and unexpected ways, those seeds will sprout. Perhaps in a hobbit who walks away from power. Perhaps in a ranger who serves without seeking glory. Perhaps in an elf who sails west not to claim reward, but to find healing. The lessons Tom taught in the deep past continue to bear fruit in the eternal present. This is the real secret of Tom Bombadil's power. He doesn't work through force or persuasion, but through example and presence. He changes the world by being utterly himself, without apology or compromise, and somehow, mysteriously, that authenticity creates space for others to discover their own authentic selves, even when that discovery requires abandoning everything they thought they wanted. The forgotten meeting between Tom and Fëanor reminds us that every act of creation is also an act of relationship. We don't make things in isolation, but in dialogue with everything that came before and everything that might come after. The question isn't whether we're influenced by others, but whether we acknowledge that influence and honor it appropriately. Fëanor's great error was believing that the Silmarils belonged only to him, when in truth they belonged to the music itself and merely passed through his hands. Tom's great wisdom was recognizing that nothing truly belongs to anyone, and paradoxically, this recognition allows him to enjoy everything without needing to possess it. In the end, the one who claims to own everything actually owns nothing, while the one who claims to own nothing actually has access to everything,